In this video, I would like to share with you one of my favorite essays by George Orwell called In Defense of English Cooking. There's recently been lively discussion on Twitter about British food, many derogatory memes shared attempting to portray my national cuisine as disgusting and inedible, while some patriots have put up a spirited defense. This has motivated me to give you what George Orwell had to say about the subject, a topic, in fact, I had already been planning to come to at some point. I will preface by saying he wrote this in 1945, when Britain still had rationing and would continue to do so for some years to come. After the video, I will give you my own thoughts, but for now, to George Orwell himself. Please like and subscribe. We have heard a great deal of talk in recent years about the desirability of attracting foreign tourists to this country. It is well known that England's two worst faults from a foreign visitor's point of view are the gloom of our Sundays and the difficulty of buying a drink. Both of these are due to fanatical minorities who will need a lot of quelling, including extensive legislation. But there is one point on which public opinion could bring about a rapid change for the better. I mean cooking. It is commonly said, even by the English themselves, that English cooking is the worst in the world. It is supposed to be not merely incompetent, but also imitative. And I even read quite recently in a book by a French writer the remark, the best English cooking is, of course, simply French cooking. Now that is simply not true. As anyone who has lived long abroad will know, there is a whole host of delicacies which is quite impossible to obtain outside the English-speaking countries. No doubt the list could be added to, but here are some of the things that I myself have sought for in foreign countries and failed to find. First of all, kippers, Yorkshire pudding, Devonshire cream, muffins, and crumpets. Then a list of puddings that would be interminable if I gave it in full. I will pick out for special mention Christmas pudding, treacle tart, and apple dumplings. Then an almost equally long list of cakes. For instance, dark plum cake, such as you used to get at Buzzards before the war, shortbread, and saffron buns. Also, innumerable kinds of biscuits, which exist of course elsewhere, but are generally admitted to be better and crisper in England. Then there are the various ways of cooking potatoes that are peculiar to our country. Where else do you see potatoes roasted under the joint, which is far and away the best way of cooking them? Or the delicious potato cakes that you get in the north of England? It is far better to cook new potatoes in the English way, that is boiled with mint and then served with a little melted butter or margarine, than to fry them, as is done in most countries. Then there are the various sauces peculiar to England. For instance, bread sauce, horseradish sauce, mint sauce, and applesauce. Not to mention red currant jelly, which is excellent with mutton as well as with hare, and various kinds of sweet pickle, which we seem to have in greater profusion than most countries. What else? Outside these islands, I have never seen a haggis, except one that came out of a tin, nor Dublin prawns, nor Oxford marmalade, nor several other kinds of jam, marrow jam and bramble jelly for instance, nor sausages of quite the same kind as ours. Then there are the English cheeses. There are not many of them, but I fancy Stilton is the best cheese of its type in the world, with Wensleydale not far behind. English apples are also outstandingly good, particularly the Cox's Orange Pippin. And finally, I would like to put in a word for English bread. All the bread is good, from the enormous Jewish loaves flavoured with caraway seeds to the Russian rye bread, which is the colour of black sheetrel. Still, if there is anything quite as good as the soft part of the crust from an English cottage loaf, how soon shall we be seeing cottage loaves again? I do not know of it. No doubt some of the things I have named above could be obtained in continental Europe, just as it is possible in London to obtain vodka or bird's nest soup. But they are all native to our shores, and over huge areas they are literally unheard of. South of, say, Brussels, I do not imagine that you would succeed in getting hold of a suet pudding. In French, there is not even a word that exactly translates as suet. The French also never use mint in cookery and do not use blackcurrants except as a basis of a drink. It will be seen that we have no cause to be ashamed of our cookery, so far as originality goes or so far as the ingredients go. And yet it must be admitted that there is a serious snag from the foreign visitor's point of view. That is, that you practically don't find good English cooking outside a private house. If you want, say, a good rich slice of Yorkshire pudding, you are more likely to get it in the poorest English home than in a restaurant, which is where the visitor necessarily eats most of his meals. It is a fact that restaurants which are distinctly English and which also sell good food are very hard to find. Pubs, as a rule, sell no food at all, other than potato crisps and tasteless sandwiches. The expensive restaurants and hotels almost all imitate French cookery and write their menus in French. Well, if you want a good cheap meal, you gravitate naturally towards a Greek, Italian, or Chinese restaurant. We are not likely to succeed in attracting tourists while England is thought of as a country of bad food and unintelligible bylaws. At present, one cannot do much about it, but sooner or later, rationing will come to an end, and then will be the moment for our national cookery to revive. It is not a law of nature that every restaurant in England should be either foreign or bad, and the first step towards an improvement will be a less long-suffering attitude in the British public itself. There are a few reasons this is one of my favourite Orwell essays. Firstly, Orwell's simple, natural patriotism comes through here. Orwell is more often remembered as a writer against totalitarianism and as a writer for socialism, but I think taking his work as a whole, Orwell the patriot is just as important. Secondly, I think it's right to be patriotic about the mundane and the everyday. Patriotism isn't only about the constitution, the state, kings and queens and militaries, it's also about the simple elements of our physical and cultural surroundings, landscape, architecture, family life, and in this case, cooking. And of course, none of these necessarily have to be the best or unimprovable. British food is not the best. Orwell himself recognized that there was a trend in British cuisine towards factory-produced fake food, the so-called prol feed of his novel 1984. But it is good when done right, and we should be proud of it. Many of the casual accusations against British food are simply lazy. They're not based on reality or are based on finding the worst possible examples. Like Orwell, I've lived a large portion of my life abroad, and there is plenty to miss when you are away. While by the same token, you will find abroad that other countries, they also do things with food that are often held against British cooking. Plenty of foreign food is aesthetically unappealing to the uninitiated and has surprising ingredients, but it turns out to be enjoyable if you find a good rendition of the dish and are willing to try. The discussion on British food is not all memes and trolling on Twitter. It is a small battlefield in the larger struggle for the soul of the British people and of Western people generally. For example, people sometimes say that the British national dish is chicken tikka masala. It isn't, by the way, but no doubt many say something like that lazily, just repeating an oft-heard refrain, just the way they will repeat some oft-heard refrain that British food is terrible or inedible. But years ago now, when then Labour Foreign Secretary Robin Cook said it, he had a cultural and political agenda involving multiculturalism and immigration. He was trying to reinforce a particular outlook on the future of the country. So George Orwell, as a patriot, was right to give time to the issue of food. And in today's England, it has never been more important that we take this seemingly mundane matter very seriously. All right, sausage roll time.